1:53 p.m. Friday, April 29th, 2022. So, if you've been following current events news, no, you cannot get on my lap right now. If you've been following current events news, you've been hearing about Elon Musk purchasing Twitter. Initially, he bought like a 9.2% share, which gave him the largest individual share of stock in the company. The company immediately began to revolt with rumors that he was going to make a purchase over the next week and a half after that happened. He did secure funding through financing. He basically took out a gargantuan loan against his own assets so that he wouldn't have to sell his own assets, hedging the bet that the value of what he was purchasing would go up. At the same time, the Twitter board was deciding to adopt what you would call a poison pill, which is that they were going to tank the company just to fuck with that guy. Now, the problem is the shareholders of a publicly traded company like Twitter was up until it was purchased have what they call a contractual obligation, a fiduciary obligation. Fiduciary means to do with funding, to do with your money situation, okay? They have a contractually obligated financial obligation. Sorry to use obligation twice. To the best financial interests of the shareholders of the company, not themselves, not their political allies, of the people whose money supports the company, right? So, at that point, Musk was like, well, got the financing, gonna make the offer, here you go. And of course, the joke being that it was, the Twitter stock was like 36 and change, and he was offering them 54.20, so that it literally had a 420 in it as a meme for the purchase, and he was ultimately successful in getting that. So something like 44 billion or something at $54.20 a share. So that's the main public part of the news, right? And from this point, we're going to go into stuff that you kind of have to be looking for this information to find it. A lot of this stuff gets covered up and censored in search algorithms and social media feeds and such. Okay, so what happened after the confirmation of this purchase was absolute panic at Twitter. The Slack chats, what that is a internal company-wide chat system. Most tech companies have something like this. And in the Twitter company Slack, there's a lot of debate and discussion among people. Some people were in denial of the idea that Twitter was using any kind of censorship algorithms or suppressing people. Myself, I've never really been on Twitter, but I can tell you from my experiences on YouTube as well as Facebook over the years, these companies definitely have their ways of automatically monitoring for content. They find certain keywords if you title your video a certain way or whatever. If I pull my camera down and show you a nipple, right? Supposedly, under the auspices of Section 230, which is a federal law of the Communications Decency Act, I believe, but basically the Section 230 applies to publishers and platforms. And what this means is that a publisher curates their content. A platform allows people to post and curate their own content, right? So on a basis of pure principle, right? In theory, what this means is that the Washington Post posts a dangerous lie in an op-ed. They can say, well, that's an op-ed, right? But if they post it as news, which they have done, this actually technically is supposed to open them up to liability because the organization, the publication, curates before publishing, right? I cannot log into an account as a non-employee, non-contractor, non-freelancer for that publication and type a blog post and have it be published in the paper, right? That's why it's a publisher. They curate. On the other hand, you've got Facebook, Xanga, MySpace, Minds, Gab, Twitter, all of them, right? Anywhere that you can, create an account, log in as a user, post content for others to see on the site, right? That's a platform for others, right? Under Section 230, the platform only has the responsibility of curating content for things like obscenity, illegal acts, including like incitement to violence, which actually should be First Amendment protected, in my opinion, regardless of what you think. And as such, these platforms are not as liable. However, in recent years, these platforms have become curators of their content. This makes them publishers, technically. Now, what this relates to the Twitter situation is, in curating the content, it's not so much that they delete posts. They don't do that. It's not that they cancel accounts all the time. I mean, yeah, sometimes, but for the most part, no. Initially, what they were doing was making posts that their system had determined to be problematic, less visible to anyone who subscribed, and especially to non-subscribers to that individual's account. And for a very long time, I was personally told by people who were not seeing my posts all the time, and I'd show them what I was posting and be like, wow. No, you're not shadow banned. They don't do that. You're crazy, Rob. Nobody's doing that. Don't be paranoid. That can't happen here. So now, a couple years later, what we're looking at, how many adpocalypses have there been? The advertising is typically the excuse given initially. We have advertisers. Our advertisers pay us way more money than you can ever generate with your content. And as such, if the advertisers say, we don't like that content, we're not going to advertise on that content. If we're not advertising on that content, we're not promoting that content. I think that's kind of how that goes. But ultimately, what it really comes to is that one half of an ideological divide was promoted, and the other half was stifled. Now, getting to the current event version of what's going on. A couple of days after Elon Musk bought Twitter, things started going a little funky on that site. We had people who are on the right-wing end of things. And I'll tell you, if you believe the over-amplified, falsely promoted half of the ideological divide that Twitter favored, if you believe their lies, some of these people who are now gaining followers, as these people are losing followers, are some kind of insane right-wing, want to destroy the country crazies. Except all of the people on this other side that is being stifled are pro-Constitution, oftentimes pro-government, at least insofar as the idea of law and order or whatever. Whereas the people who are being falsely promoted, amplified beyond what they actually represent as a demographic or a percentage, right? They are the ones who literally, actively, outwardly favor revolt, destruction of the current government and economic and social orders to build something new where everybody shakes hands and shares and whatever. And this is what they tell themselves while pretending they are not, in fact, in a gulag, because they themselves, proponents of that system, would inevitably be consumed as well by that system. So anyways, you got people like Marjorie Taylor Greene gaining 100,000 subscribers in a day. What this is that you go on Twitter, you start an account. Lots of people will tell you this that are on Twitter. You want to go follow a page, and eventually, some of these, you will click the follow button or subscribe or whatever it is on any given site, because this happens across the board. You will subscribe to content that you choose to subscribe to. And what will happen is, within a day or two, you will be unsubscribed from that content if they don't give you a message saying, "Sorry, this has too many. We're unable to allow you to follow." They make it so that you can't follow. At the same time, the people with their false amplification on the other side of that spectrum are losing. Not at the same rate, right? They lose 10 or 50,000, they gain 50 or 100,000. It's kind of an interesting thing, right? Now, while a lot of people have in fact left the platform because they were not happy with the way that their particular siding of the political thing was being treated. However, when the far fringe of the side that is advocating things like revolt and rioting and destruction of government, and I'm not saying that the government needs to, it's obviously poisonous, but unless we are all of us citizens together, because left wing, right wing, whatever, if you aren't in control of the country, you're not in that club, right? The whole "it's a big club, you ain't in it" thing, right? George Carlin. Unless all of us who aren't in the club side together to get rid of the government, it's not a good thing. If we all of us get together and get rid of the government, it's totally fucking cool. This is a hint, by the way. Anyways, when the people who are most upset because their false amplification in the political sphere and the public square is now being threatened, they left. A lot of them left. They said, "We're going to this other site." I don't remember what the site was called now, but there's some alternate Twitter clone that is apparently supposed to be the left-wing haven or whatever. That site gained about 40,000 subscribers total. 40,000. Now, I would say that the 40,000 people probably it's more like 20,000 with at least one sock account for each one. What is a sock account? A sock account is literally a sock puppet of an account that you create so that you can post things in a fake name without it being traced back to your real name. And this relates to something that will come into this conversation in just a moment. The claim is that these people are a horde, numerous. Every time somebody does something that is not politically correct or that is problematic according to that ideology, you get something where this, individual is checking their account and they get like 30 or 50 or 100, and these large corporations, they'll get a couple thousand tweets, emails, whatever, right? Messages sent to them. "Hey, did you know that your company supports this thing that I think is terrible?" And they word it in a way to be like, basically, "I don't know if you knew this, but you're funding Nazis." That's how they put it. And of course, then the people in the PR departments of these companies are spineless. They want to keep their job. They want whatever cushy paycheck salary they get for effectively doing nothing. What happens is these people are not as numerous, the ones sending the emails and the messages, doing the cancel mob, right? So what it is that there are probably 10 million people who were booted off of Twitter because their politics were too close to the right. Because the people that were running the site were too close to the left. On the other hand, the people who are outwardly vocal, what they call a vocal minority, utilize sock accounts to amplify, to manufacture consensus, as it were, to falsely give the appearance of that there are more of us than there really are. The reality is, in the country, about 35% of people identify as Republicans or with Republican causes, or at least as conservatives, because even most conservatives, and I mean most, like 90% of conservatives that you talk to these days, if you talk to conservative people, will tell you that the Republican Party is trash. Now, you talk to liberal people, of which there's probably 30%, but not as many as the conservative half. I got to tell you, man, by demographics, by the polls, the conservatives versus the liberals, it's more like that. So what is that? 65%, right? What's the other 35%? Well, I think, or no. How does it work? How does it work? The actual demographics are, what is it? It's about 40% are independent. No, sorry. So it's about 40% are independent. So it's about 25 of each, leaving 10% for fringes and undecided, right? Okay. So anyways, the non-voting, non-registered independent population is about the size of both bullshit political parties put together. That's something that needs to be understood. Secondly, of those two bullshit political parties, more people identify with the causes of the conservative half than they do with the liberal half. This is a fact. This is not because reality has a conservative bias. It is because most of the insane bullshit that the people on that one side push, and don't get me wrong, there's insane bullshit on the right too. This burning need to clamp down on abortion laws when the reality is the actual number of abortions that take place are tiny. And most situations are not, well, I'm a complete and total coos, I better go get that baby done. No. Most people do not do that. And I think I've spoken on this before, that if you know anybody who's actually gone through either a miscarriage or an actual abortion, it wrecks them emotionally. This is not something you do like you went to the gas station and you bought a pack of cigarettes and a soda and you came back home. No. This is emotionally devastating, something completely different, right? But the thing is, very few people on that conservative angle have been through that, and I'm not urging that they do. I'm just saying they need to have frank conversations with people that have so they can understand, because most of their arguments don't fit their cause, much like a lot of the people on the other side of it. So, the people on the other side of it, the loud cancel mob. Well, okay, let's pause that. Ding, ding. Okay. It was revealed after about 3 days of Elon Musk owning Twitter and having access to their systems that the leaks of, what was it, Project Veritas had a number of staff conference calls were recorded and leaked. Oh, it's about time for a new cigarette machine. Anyways, Slack chats and internal emails and internal conference calls were leaked. Yay! So, on one side, no, not even side, let's just start saying, here's some instances of things that were observed. That's the best way to look at it. Instances of things that were observed. People saying, well, they're talking about they're going to be undoing the shadow banning. We don't actually do that, though, do we? And then someone responds, well, actually, here's how we do it, and this is what we call it, and yeah. It was years and years of being gaslit by retards and idiots and morons. Politically handicapped people. Oh, no, you don't do that. Oh, you're crazy. You're paranoid. Remember, this is the guy that was effectively right about everything for the last 3-4 years. And I mean, long before that, too, right? Long before the pandemic. But even at that point, I was right. I was right the entire fucking time. About masks, about virus propagation, about sexual transmission being the primary component, all of it, right? And there is ample peer-reviewed science to back up things like that. But nobody wanted to hear that. They wanted to listen to that asshat on the television who pretends to be a doctor and then tell people like me that I'm anti-science. So those people, those are the ones complaining. They're the ones who are oddly silent most of the time about the amazing job that our current president is doing. Didn't really have much to say about Afghanistan, even though they're claimed to be anti-war people. Really have anything to say about Ukraine other than support Ukraine, and you say something about Nazis and they're like, oh no, but they're our Nazis. And at the same time, these are the people who just 2, 3, 4 years ago were like, hey, if you think they're a Nazi, punch him, because punch a fucking Nazi. Retarded. and I mean this in the literal sense, somehow prevented from learning, from mental advancement and development. Well, come to find out, yes, they were stifling anyone who did not agree with whatever the line of the company was, right? And the line of the company was being determined by a board of directors. This board of directors is supposed to be large shareholders in the company making decisions, which is why initially it was said that Elon Musk would be on the board of directors. And then he decided not to. The reason for this was if he was to make a purchase and the board of directors tried to screw the company to screw him, if he's not on the board of directors, they have that fiduciary obligation to him as a shareholder for the best possible financial outcome of his shares. Now he buys the company. We come to find out, we're just observing it for the few days that it was purchased by him. They panicked at Twitter. They removed all, very nearly all, I should say, of their shadow banning and blocking algorithms. All of a sudden, Twitter worked for everyone the way it was supposed to work the entire fucking time. And then we come to find out yesterday, Twitter was inflating its quarterly user numbers to include sock accounts. Not that we have 30 million users, we have 30 million accounts. But they said users. And they just added numbers to it. So what's funny is, I don't think a lot of these conservative types are actually gaining followers. I think that they're existing numbers of followers that Twitter has been pushing those numbers down. Just bogus numbers, right? But these bogus numbers were also in their quarterly financial reports to shareholders. What this means is for the last 3 to 4 years at least, if not longer, Twitter was defrauding its investors significantly. Its advertisers, its investors, its users were all defrauded. Why does Twitter matter? Twitter matters because it is right now effectively the public square for socio-political and economic dialogue. It may not seem like it because there's a lot of weird shit posting and everything else, but it is the place where everyone has these discussions. Because, in theory, the way Twitter's algorithm is supposed to work, just about anyone can see a post that you make. So if you say something valid, someone might see it if it fits, right? But instead they were doing shady things. So, I think that when Katy Perry lost 100,000 subscribers, it was because those were fake accounts that were deleted because they were political operative accounts that were also being used to puff up people who were with their cause or whatever. And of course, if you're paying attention, Hollywood is basically infested with the brain fungus. So, and this video is coming up on the end here. I may have to continue. Come to find out that the total number of people that you would call left-wing, that are anti-free speech, that act like fascists while calling other people fascists, that say punch a Nazi, but then want to support the Ukrainian Nazis. They aren't even neo-Nazis. They're actual Nazis that have been operating since World War II that were not eradicated. It's a pocket of the disease that just festered for a century. But support them because we don't like Russia. Why don't we like Russia? Because the news and the people who control what people see on Twitter want you to hate Russia. Now, what have I just been talking about for almost half an hour here? Right? The subscriber count's going up on the right wing, where people that were always there. The subscriber count's going down on the left wing, where people that never really existed. Now, I think I can keep this within the next minute and a half here before this video has to end for space purposes. Take everything that I've said so far without me having to recap further, and if you have any questions, just start the video over. Let's talk about puffed numbers. Let's talk about fraudulent defrauding of investors, right? Taxpayers are investors in a country. They are shareholders in a country, and they are being defrauded by puffed numbers. What if 81 million turned out to only be like 50 million. Now, what platform was most influential in the process of the Secret Shadow campaign to save the election, to fortify the election? As what was it? Time Magazine called it a secret cabal. Well, I mean, duh. They used Twitter. They used Facebook, and they used the corrupt algorithms on those platforms to silence people who disagreed with their side and to artificially give the appearance of more people being on their side. What it ultimately comes down to is the people that were like, oh, well, majority wins, and there's 5 of them, and there's like 50 people over here going, yo, what the fuck? And the people over here, like, there's only 10 people there, and there's more of us. No. So I think I'll be able to keep this at just one video. I may speak on this further because more news is coming out, but yeah, Twitter's a gargantuan fraud. The left wing is not nearly as numerous or as powerful or as popular as they like to tell people that they are. And assuming that there isn't further fortification this coming November when they have the midterm elections, I think things are going to change a little bit. So anyways, happy Friday.